I think this year we have witnessed the fundamental failure of the Russian state to insulate its people from the war that it euphemistically calls the special military operation. It's hitting people's lives in all kinds of different ways, from e-commerce, warehouses. We've seen fuel shortages, internet outages. Now, obviously, Ukraine, its gloves are very much off when it comes to these deep strikes, and we're seeing mounting casualties as a result of that. And this is now playing out politically. This year, we're seeing anti-war sentiment rising. Putin's approval ratings are dropping, albeit from a very high level. And with parliamentary elections coming up in September, the Kremlin is now moving to stamp out the last vestiges of political opposition. And one of those last vestiges is a man called Boris Nadezhdin. He has spent 40 years in Soviet and Russian politics and is now Russia's newest political exile. This has happened so suddenly for you. 1 minute you're running for parliament,
yes,
and now you're here.
It's all my life I have a lot of adventures.
Boris Nadezhdin, Soviet bureaucrat, Russian opposition figure and former presidential hopeful, can now add exile to his list. We meet in Paris a couple of weeks after he was forced to flee Russia amid a mounting pressure campaign to bar him from running in upcoming parliamentary elections.
When I was announced as a foreign agent in 10th of July, I declared for all of the world I will not stop my campaign. In Monday, I was arrested by police, taken police department, etc., etc., etc.
He was convicted of displaying extremist symbols and given a small fine. Then came the summons from Russia's powerful investigative committee.
Normally, after you go to this place, you will receive the criminal paper and go to the court, and after court go to the jail Lefortovo. When I have received this paper about criminal investigation, I have understood that it's a question of 3 days.
I am alive and I am free, he announced on Telegram on arriving in France. Previous Russian opposition figures were not so lucky. I mean, there was Nemtsov, who you worked with, Navalny, but you tried to do opposition within the system. Then the system came for you.
I didn't cross the red lines for 40 years of my political biography. The red line number 1 is not to criticize Putin like a person. And cross line number 2, to have no support from foreign governments. I never crossed these lines. But these lines have changed.
Behind Putin's facade of stability, Russia is cracking down harder, Nadezhdin says, because as the war drags on, dissent is rising. In early 2024, his campaign to run for president on an anti-war platform exposed an undercurrent of despair in society. Long lines of his supporters formed across the country, a quiet, legal protest. That undercurrent, he says, is now bubbling up. Just this week, demonstrators gathered as Russia's highest court blocked Yabloko, the only remaining anti-war party, from the parliamentary elections.
The understanding of that everybody wants to stop the war, it's in the society, is in the elite and in the nearest people around Putin. And of course, the understanding of what is war is really means for Russian economy.
Does Putin understand this?
Yes, Putin and people around him. It's quite possible to freeze the mutual strikes, and but the question of how to be in peace with West, be in peace with Ukraine, is a question of next generations.
Nadezhdin himself is now in limbo. His family is still in Russia. On the day we met, he missed his daughter's wedding.
They
just got married.
Now.
His political project, one of the last vestiges of Russian political opposition, for now on hold. Do you worry that you've left Russia for good?
I think I could return to my country only when the political situation will change.
So Nadezhdin believes, Selma, that if Russia were to stop now, somehow pause all strikes, they would be able to fire up the propaganda machine and successfully paint this as some kind of victory at home. But look, Russian actions, Russian rhetoric, none of that suggests that that is the intention. It may be that they even plan to escalate at this point. And so his message is that the longer this goes on, the weaker Putin's grip on power.
Russia and Ukraine continue to attack one another with civilians caught in the crossfire. Ukrainian officials say Russian strikes killed 6 people and wounded 19 overnight in the southern city of Zaporizhia. In Kyiv, officials in Ukraine say a Russian missile strike damaged a children's hospital, leaving craters outside the facility. Patients and medical staff were taking shelter at the time and survived the attack uninjured. The Russian assault came as Ukraine continues its drone attacks on warehouses belonging to Russia's largest online retailer. CNN's Nick Paton-Walsh is following the story for us from Kyiv. So, Nick, it is civilians obviously caught in the crossfire as Russia and Ukraine continue to exchange aerial attacks. What more are you learning about this latest attack overnight?
Yeah, I mean, here in Kiev, as you pointed out, the children's hospital hit, some damage done there, some quite dramatic images, in fact, of the impact on the building. But as you pointed out, the children inside the patients in the shelter at that particular time. But in Zaporizhia, the city in the south that took the brunt of the Russian assault last night, 6 dead, 19 injured, apartment buildings hit there. Interestingly, Ukraine pointing towards North Korean missiles predominantly being used in this attack, the KN-23, suggesting further help from Pyongyang and possibly also to limits maybe in the Russian supply of their missiles. But it does seem as though Moscow increasingly has more ballistics to use on a nightly basis, going from about 60 a couple of months ago to close to possibly edging towards 200 maybe at some point in the months to come. But they're able to fire over a month-long period. So a startling rise here and aimed clearly to exploit the massive gaps in Ukraine's air defences now. A huge lack of Patriot interceptors that Ukraine has made public, the result of so many of them being used during the Gulf conflict, that there's very few left for the United States or European nations to potentially provide here. A real crisis there, one that President Trump suggested he might potentially fix when he, during the NATO meeting in Ankara, suggested Ukraine might get a license to produce them themselves. That simply hasn't happened. In fact, his latest comment suggests that may indeed be very far off indeed, if not entirely impossible. But at the same time, Christina, Ukraine is responding to this Russian nightly barrage that's been going on for years. A result of Russia's invasion, Ukraine now able to take some of that fight back. And it's the Wild Berries distribution network, kind of like a Russian Amazon, so to speak, that's taken a lot of the strikes over the past weeks. One near Voronezh, 180 kilometres inside Russia's borders being hit. 16,000 square metres, indeed, officials there saying had a fire on it. Potentially Wild Berry seeing over 10% of its capacity reduced. Ukraine says it's a legitimate target as it's involved in the logistics of the Russian military, used essentially to deliver the things indeed that they need. And also too, overnight in Orsk, an oil refinery 1,500 kilometres inside Russia also hit. So Ukraine continuing the exact toll. We have seen Russian civilians killed as part of these strikes in the past week or so. And indeed in Ukraine, we've seen now the deadliest month last month in July since April 2022 for civilians. So these nightly barrages suggesting the war is becoming less about the tiny territorial gains that Russia hasn't made much of, frankly, over its past summer offensive, and more about the damage each side is inflicting on the other in these nightly assaults.
Nick Paton-Walsh there reporting from Kyiv. Thanks, Nick. Appreciate it.